Where there's thunder, there's lightning. John Nada. We talk about the gynocentric society, or the gynocracy, if you will, in MGTOW. And I would imagine that very few disagree with this idea. You can see it in the advertisements on television. You can see it on the television shows themselves. You can see the divide and the gap between how men are viewed and portrayed and how women are viewed and portrayed. But there are still those under the blue pill programming. There are still those stuck in the matrix. There are still those that believe that a patriarchy exists. There are still those that believe women have it so much harder than men in modern Western society. But if you don't believe that the society is gynocentric, it doesn't take very much research to find out that this is definitely true, that it is gynocentric. Just look at the laws. Now, we must ask ourselves why such laws exist. Why are such laws enacted? And it doesn't just start when we become young adolescent males, teenagers, or adults, but it starts very early on. The powers that be must destroy masculinity, because by destroying masculinity, you destroy any opposition. The powers that be destroy any opposition. The empire destroys any opposition to its takeover, to its control. You have to destroy the men, and you have to destroy the archetypes of masculinity in order to have a compliant society. And again, I mentioned this starts early. It wasn't something I really thought a whole lot about until the past couple weeks, but if you notice, the programming starts early. And the programming has not really changed for men, but it has changed for women. For a moment, go back with me, if you will, to a time when you were a young lad and, you're in school, kindergarten, primary, first grade, all that. What were some of the things that you noticed at that particular point in time? There was this narrative pushed for men to treat women, or rather boys to treat girls, as princesses, as queens, to treat them with chivalry, to treat them with the utmost respect, even in the face of the disrespect that they showed to you. It didn't matter that she threw the dirt at you. It didn't matter that she spit on you. It didn't matter that she grabbed your arm out of nowhere and bit you. You are a boy. You're a man. You're a little gentleman, and you're supposed to overlook whatever indecencies that the little princesses do. However, if you were to do such a thing, you would be lambasted, crucified. Scorched earth policy would be unleashed on you, and you would more than likely end up in an alternative school for the remainder of your school days. There's been many an article put out on the MGTOW Reddit, and some of the MGTOW content producers have also talked about this. But if you notice, the programming for the boys has not changed. We're still to be chivalrous. We're still to treat women as ladies. We're still to open the door for women. We're still to open the car door for women, pull the seat out for a woman. But there is no expectation for how a woman is to act. In fact, there are many memes and pictures and things posted of what a real man does, but never one about what a real woman does, because there is no expectations for women. Because you don't have expectations for children, simply put. Not only that, but the weapons that they employed against young men have been the ADHD medications, the Ritalin medications, which are basically, I did some research a few months back on the origins of those things. It's basically low-grade speed or low-grade meth. Now, not to say that there aren't those that have those difficulties with focus, and there certainly is something to be said for a phenomenon like this, but the wideness and the liberalness of the application of these prescriptions for young boys, simply for acting like young boys, it doesn't fit the picture. They're prescribing way more of this medication than of the phenomenon that actually exists. And there are even young gentlemen societies in school now. where boys are taught to dress nicely, wear a tie, not necessarily in and of themselves bad things. Uh, perhaps these societies teach young men such valuable skills as how to tie a tie or things like that. But wherein I have a problem with it in is where these societies teach young men to view women in an unrealistic and an untrue fashion. And they'll only come to find this out when they take the red pill. They'll only come to find this out when they go through countless heartbreaks and realize that the blue pill world that had been sold to them was not true. But then yet I go back to the idea that there are no cotillion or finishing societies for women anymore. That is viewed as being misogynistic because you're having expectations that women act like women. Toxic masculinity is a phrase bandied about, which, if you read between the lines, basically all toxic masculinity is not serving women, not serving the interest of women. So I go through all that to say this, because I had to set everything up. Some of the laws, I don't know if you've ever really looked at the laws in your respective countries, but it's important that you do so. One such law here in the United States is the Lautenberg Amendment. The Lautenberg Amendment is nothing more than an attempt to disarm men through draconian measures and to deprive them of their Second Amendment right. The Lautenberg Amendment doesn't just apply to felonies, but also applies to some misdemeanor cases. The Lautenberg Amendment applies in a domestic violence scenario or situation where someone is convicted of a domestic violence offense, regardless of whether or not a firearm was actually used in the offense. And this is where I learned about the Lautenberg Amendment was in the military. Basically, it could be any domestic violence accusation. It doesn't have to be that you hit anybody. It doesn't have to be that any kind of physical violence was used against anybody. It doesn't even have to be true. The accusations don't even have to be true. You just have to be convicted of them in order to lose your Second Amendment rights. And this could include anything and up to just yelling, just raising your voice at your wife or girlfriend. I mean, again, look at your laws. Assault by contact is not in and of itself a domestic violence charge, but if you are accused of assault by contact on a wife or girlfriend, it will be treated as a domestic violence charge. And assault by contact could be something as simple as pushing her out of the way of the doorway because she wouldn't let you pass. Something as simple as throwing something in her direction. Something as simple as lightly laying a hand on her to remove her hand from your throat or to remove her from blocking you. Or it's not even, I mean, if you read it, assault by contact can be construed as almost anything. And again, when I was in the military, MP soldiers, or rather MPs, would often arrest soldiers, even though it was clear that the soldier just had the unmitigated crap beaten out of him. But because he's the soldier and because he's the man, they really, the civilian authorities weren't involved. So rather than arrest the civilian wife or the dependopotamus, the soldier, who they could hold accountable, would be the one in trouble. And again, it could be a verbal argument, something as simple as disagreeing with a woman, so she calls the cops on you. The Duluth model is another tool of the gynocracy. It is designed to pad domestic violence statistics. Women know that they can lie to the police and say that they were hit, say that they were injured, say that they were assaulted, without there having to necessarily be any physical proof of that. Because the Duluth model dictates that police act. Women also know that they can call the police on their spouse, boyfriend, partner, whatever, to kind of give them a little bit of a wake-up call, to kind of let them know who's in charge, because they know they can call the police up to ask to act as their own personal goon squad when the man does something that the woman doesn't like or approve of. Kind of just scare him a little bit. Let him know who's boss. Police hands are tied because they must do something. And in most of these cases of domestic violence, where there is because you don't ever hear about it, but there are men who are victims of domestic violence. I think it was like the last statistic I saw was like 40 or 41% of men were had been domestically abused. And I think this was an Australian statistic. But yet there are no resources for men. There are no battered men's shelters, no single father shelters, no compensation for men in terms of being victims of domestic abuse, because it's not even acknowledged that men are victims of domestic abuse. Just like there are countless resources for homeless women, but none for homeless veterans. Women use the police to keep men in line, so therefore they call them. Verbal arguments are responded to oftentimes by police, and in many cases, these are just marital arguments. These are just, family disagreements or whatever about money or what they're going to have for dinner that night or whatever. It has absolutely nothing to do with the police or the state. It's of no business to either entity. But yet, if a third party calls in, or if one of the parties involved in the argument calls in, and the police respond, oftentimes a report's still made. And many times it's made known, particularly to the man, that if a return trip is made by the police, an arrest will take place for continuation of domestic violence. Women are rarely asked to leave in these instances, even though they may have countless brothers or a mother or a father, and they don't even own the house. It's the house that the man paid for. But women are rarely asked to leave. A lot of times that's because they have the children there. And again, men are not seen as a part of the family, and men are not seen as having any kind of actual custody of their children, because they can be ass launched from their family at any time by the courts. And the state effectively owns most children if there is not a woman who has custody of that child. The state would rather have custody of the child than to give it to a father. And because of the Duluth model, there's no due process really for the man who is accused of domestic violence. And again, it could range anywhere from a verbal argument to he got his ass whooped, but she lied about it. No due process because the state files the charges and prosecutes the individual. So you're already basically guilty till proven innocent on that one. Here's another one. The Violence Against Women Act presupposes only women are victims of abuse. There is no equal help for men, and millions of dollars are funneled into this ideologically flawed program. There are anger management classes available for men who are accused of doing nothing more than raising their voice to their wife or girlfriend at $60 a week for 6 months. Other examples of gynocentrism are the Title IX courts in college, where again, no due process is afforded to anybody that is male, because the preponderance of evidence is all that is required to convict one of the crime, which is 51% instead of beyond a shadow of a doubt, or beyond a reasonable doubt. So there, your reputation and in some cases your opportunity to advance in an occupation, to get a degree, your future is ruined and is at stake should you decide to date in college, should you decide to go to college as a male, period. Everything is rape. There's another example. Yes means yes. Whereas the definition of rape used to be a pretty solid, knife being held to an individual's throat and then being, forced into intercourse. Now, rape can mean anything from, I got a little bit too drunk to, the next morning I just feel bad and I regret it, therefore it was rape. Again, look at your laws, look at your society, look at your culture and entertainment. If you don't believe the society is gynocentric, you don't have to look too hard to find out the truth if that's what you're really interested in. As always, this has been the Days of Thunder. I am John Nada, and remember, you're free to do as you're told.